another Mailbag Monday here on the Athletic Football Show. We are deep, and now it's like the middle of May. We're deep into the offseason, and the questions reflect that in a way that I appreciate. Have a lot of good ones that we want to get to today. Yet again, our producer Katie is stepping in for Michael Beller. Katie, let's go here. Let's let it rip. What's the first one?
First one is Nat on Discord. This came up a little bit in the conversation about the Buccaneers, but I'd love if the show could address it head on. What is Baker Mayfield? What would it take for him to go to the Super Bowl? What are the best, worst, and most likely paths for him over the next approximately 5 years? Dave, this feels like a perfect question for you.
I disagree.
I had a feeling it would start with me as the Baker guy. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. This question made me realize that we're about to have a conversation about the Mendoza line of franchise quarterbacks, and we now have a quarterback named Mendoza in the NFL, and I think that's amazing. But I think that's ultimately how I see Baker Mayfield. I think he is like the bar for whether or not you have a franchise quarterback. Not like the minimum, like I think Baker Mayfield he's somewhere in that range of like he's capable of playing like a top 10 guy in spurts. He's capable of looking like a much more middle of the pack guy, depending on his health, depending on the supporting cast, depending on how well his decision making is playing out for him. And I think you can build a contender around Baker Mayfield. I think it's going to be harder to do than it would be for a lot of other quarterbacks. And Robert and I talked about this on a show within the last week or so, I guess week or two, where I think the Bucs' best path over the next 3 years is probably just to roll with Baker. I'm just not convinced they have a shot at upgrading from him in a realistic manner, i.e. the draft or, a buy low contract, because they already did that. His name's Baker Mayfield. And so across his 3 years in Tampa, I wanted to look this up. He's 14th in the league in adjusted EPA per play. He's 9th in the league in total pass EPA. He's 17th in success rate. He's 13th in passer rating. He's top 5 in rush EPA added among quarterbacks. So it's not all great. It's middling. And I think as we've seen, he can reach some really, really high ceilings. We haven't seen it sustainable across an entire season. I think with the right supporting cast, aka a really, really strong supporting cast, Baker Mayfield could be that guy. And the last thing I would say before I turn it over to what y'all think, I just want to note the 2020 through 2022 Buccaneers, the Brady Buccaneers, who won a Super Bowl and were contenders for at least one other, they were 7th in EPA per play and 7th in success rate defensively over the course of Brady's time in Tampa. In the 3 years that Baker's been there, they've been 19th in EPA per play and 21st in success rate. Like, they just haven't been a very balanced team. They haven't been a very good defense across Baker's time in Tampa. And so I think if you were able to build a team around him that could achieve similar results on offense while being much, much better on defense, I absolutely think it's possible. I think it's a tougher needle to thread, and he's a smaller guy. Injuries at this point have been a consistent problem for him. I think you got to have your eyes wide open about that, but I think he's a franchise quarterback for at least the next 3 to 5 years, I guess.
I think the what would it take part in the question is interesting because I think the answer is 2024. Like, that team was good enough for them to have done it. And obviously the defense was more like...
certainly was.
Right. The offense was, I mean, they had a top 3 offensive line. They had pass catchers galore. Bucky Irving was playing really well as a rookie. Liam Cohen was calling a fantastic offense. That was all the factors they needed on that side of the ball. And to Dave's point, the defense was not nearly as good as it was during the Brady runs, but it was acceptable, and it was certainly better than it was in 2025. Obviously, in 2025, that defense sunk them. In 2024, it was good enough that, if Baker had gotten hot, they could have won a few shootouts, 31-28 or 27, whatever it would have been. And so I think, to me, that is the caliber of team it takes for Baker Mayfield. Obviously, they just didn't get it done that year. They ran into a red-hot, weird Washington team and kind of ended up losing that game. But that, to me, is what it looks like. And then I think the second part of the question, where it's best, worst, most likely outcome. The best is that he just sustains like somewhere close to 20, like the in between 2023 and 2024, that level of quarterback production where he's like the 11th, 12th best guy production wise. Maybe you don't think he's actually that good, but he can at least produce up to that quality. The worst outcome is like a Russell Wilson situation where if the mobility goes, I think Baker Mayfield kind of goes. I think he's a more prolific passer than Russ is, and he's a little bit more willing to make certain throws. But I think because Baker has actually become one of the most effective scramblers in the league, I think if that element of his game goes, the gunslinging is just going to turn into picks on picks on picks. And so that to me is like the worst outcome.
Yeah, I think I want to amend. 5 years feels like a long time for
5
Baker
years is
to
a
be
really
able-
long time.
Yeah, he'd be 36. Yeah.
I'd say 2 to 3 years. I think you can build something meaningful around Baker Mayfield.
That's exactly the timeline that I had in mind. And so there's a couple different, there are literally 3 different questions here from Nat. What is Baker Mayfield? I'm with Dave in that I think that Baker Mayfield is the best representation of the, whatever you want to call it, Dalton line, Carr continuum, the version of Kirk Cousins that we have now, like that he is there. And so what is that type of player? I think that type of quarterback is right on the line of, is he good enough or do you want to replace him? And I think the other thing is that player definitively and directly rises and falls based on the quality of what is around him. And I think that is what Baker Mayfield is. The question that I think is really interesting associated with that sort of player is that sort of player is fine. You have to pay that sort of player the correct amount for the rest of the roster to be able to come together. So Carr and Andy Dalton, to me, are really interesting examples of this if you go back like over the last 10 years. Andy Dalton was always paid as a third-tier quarterback. He was always paid as a middle-class quarterback for the entirety of his time as a starter. So he was making $16 million a year on his 6-year rookie extension after that rookie contract. He never got paid more than that as a starting quarterback. Derrik Carr did. Derrik Carr was making $40-ish million a year. Even when Derrik Carr got paid by the Saints, he was getting paid like, even if it was just outside of the top 10, it was still grouped up with the players that were 7 through 10. What happens on Baker's next contract, I think, is a really interesting question. If Baker slots in where he is right now, which is right with Sam Darnold as the lowest paid starting quarterbacks in the NFL, then I think you can live with that sort of investment for what you're getting from a player like Baker Mayfield. If Baker comes in and he's like, Daniel Jones is at 44 now, I'm better than Daniel Jones, I want 50. That starts to become the way that Derrik Carr was paid during stretches of his career, and I think it's harder to live with that sort of player. So I think that, to me, is why the Baker contract question is worthwhile, because how he's compensated based on where he falls, we have recent examples of this and how that kind of quarterback contract can hamstring you. The Vikings and Kirk Cousins is another good example. Like when everything's going great, you see the version of it where you can get over the top, but it's almost dangerous to talk yourself into that version of it because so many things need to come together if you're paying that guy on the high end of what he's worth for like the totality of the team to make sense.
I would just say, and what makes it interesting is 50 is QB 11 in the current landscape in terms of AAV. I mean,
I wouldn't be doing it that way though. I wouldn't. It wouldn't be where he was ranked. It would be like the gap between the field and those quarterbacks. I think there should be a gap between the field and Baker Mayfield if he's compensated correctly, the way there is right now.
Mm-hmm.
How like if he was making Daniel Jones's salary, you're out on that. Like if it was 44 million and the 40, let's even just say 46 for inflation or whatever, $46 million a year, and the cap is it's going to jump into like the 320s probably, barring some sort of catastrophe next year. So
I would think about it, because I think the only reason that Daniel
that's
Jones
14% of your cap.
I think with him specifically, it's not just the quality of player. It's that he's already over 30, and he's a player, again, where I think once the mobility goes at that age, it could go next year, like if something happens. It probably won't because he was really, really good this year. But you know what I'm saying? Whereas, like, I think if this exact quality of player was 26 years old, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, you do that every time.
The Daniel Jones part of it We talked about this. I think overpaying for a guy like that is easier to do when you're in a spot where the Colts are, where it's just like, we got no choice. Like this is a 1-year thing where we're trying to do everything we can to squeeze what we can out of this entire situation. I just don't think that's what's going to happen with the Bucs. Like my gut feeling is, and we could talk about what's best, worst, and most likely. My gut feeling with the Bucs is this is probably the last year for this staff, for this coaching staff. And if that's the case, and you are turning the page as an organization next year, you have a choice about whether you want Baker Mayfield at $47 million to be the starting point of the next version of your organization. If this was a situation where it's like, we're putting all of our chips in, that's a 1-year thing, we have to see what we can get out of this version of the offense, then you do it. That's just not where the Bucs are. They're in a very different situation, and I think they're going to be, than where the Colts are with Daniel Jones right now. And I think that changes the way that you can and should think about it, personally.
My opinion on Baker hinges pretty heavily on what he's making. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can incur. I've got some tolerance for risk with how much you pay him, but yeah, like the closer you get toward into the 50s, and I mean, I wouldn't want to go a whole lot higher than that. Preferably, I wouldn't even want to hit 50. I'm curious to see how that goes, because that was our whole conversation a couple weeks ago, Robert. It's hard to buy the vision for what the Bucs are doing in 2026. And I mean, if that's because they'd rather keep their options open, okay. But if you have an inkling that you can go somewhere with Baker Mayfield, I'd rather just get it out of the way now. But yeah, I mean, if they don't feel that way, fine.
These quarterbacks can go either way. Like, if you wanted to give me a full-throated argument as to why Baker Mayfield is still better than a lot of the alternatives, even at a higher price tag, I've heard those arguments for all of these types of guys in the past, and I get them. Like, I've joked, like, winning in the NFL was winning with Ryan Tannehill making $30 million. Like, I still believe that. And so, like, there are still viable paths with that sort, but you can make a choice. Like, it's also worth acknowledging the ways that sort of quarterback potentially hamstrings you. And I think that's an important thing to do if you're in a position like the Bucs might be, where you have a choice, where there is like a fork in the road and you can choose to go one direction or the other.
What do you think, barring something insane, like the whole roster falling apart or Baker missing the entire season? Like, what is realistically the highest the Bucs could be picking in the draft? Like 8, 9, 10, if the season is just freaking abysmal, just unbelievably awful.
Probably, because even a bad outcome, like the offense is still talented enough that like it would be hard to see them being like terrible.
If they went 7-10 next year, I don't think that's like a crazy outcome. That's very much on the low end, but I don't think that's insane. What's the Bucs over under?
But you know, we say this, and then there's always a team that collapses. Like it's possible. It's possible.
It's 8.5.
It's 8.5, and so them being a 7-10 team, I don't think is nuts.
It's not nuts, but it also, even going 7-10 doesn't necessarily put them in position to draft a quarterback that lets them out of this the area where they are. You know, I mean, if they want to re-ride the Baker carousel with the next guy who only wants $2 or $3 million, that's fine. But odds are you're going to wind up with somebody like Baker Mayfield again. Which is good, by the way. Like, Baker Mayfield's a good player, but the way out of this world is to draft a higher caliber of prospect, and I just don't know. I don't know if the Bucs can be bad enough for that to be a realistic option.
The Broncos drafted Bo Nix 10th overall. Would you rather have Bo Nix at this point making Bo Nix rookie money, or would you rather have Baker making $48 million a year?
I abstain.
But Bo was 12th. Bo was 12th, I believe.
Whatever it is, a quarterback outside of the top 5 in range where the Bucs might be drafting. Or let's play it out even further. Like would you rather right now, if I gave you the next 4 years and you could get Tyler Shough on his contract that he currently has, or you could get Baker at $48 million a year, which would you rather do?
Baker at $48 million a year. I mean, that's going to sound negative toward Tyler Shough, but like that, it's 6 games of like pretty good quarterback play, as opposed to a guy in Baker that I've seen lead his team to the playoffs on multiple occasions and play like a really, really good quarterback for at least a few stretches there.
I think that's
think
too
it's-
mystery box. I don't know.
I completely understand where you guys are coming from. I also just think that this like glimmer of competency is dangerous. There is like a downside to it because you're just like, well, I've seen Baker be pretty good. Like, I'd rather have that. Well, it's like, well, what you're paying him to be that version of good when we acknowledge how much has to go right around him for him to get there. And if you're paying Tyler Shough $500,000 a year or whatever it is, it gives you a better chance to make sure everything else is right around that player.
Calling what Baker has done in Tampa a glimmer of competency and then opting for Tyler Shough is pretty wild, though. And like that's exactly what Tyler Shough has done. It's just that you're not as scared of the price. That's all.
2024 was a magnificent season. Okay. Last year, Baker was objectively bad.
Yes.
He was objectively
after
bad.
being
After like the first 6 weeks, yeah.
objectively great for 6 weeks, and then it all fell apart.
He was objectively bad in 2025. 2024 was phenomenal, right? Like, where do you think in 2023 we treat as this like resurgent year? And he was good, and the counting stats are good. Where do you think the Bucs ranked in passing DVOA in 2023?
14th.
16th.
Close.
So we have 16th. We have the Liam Cohen Comet year, and then we have last year where he was objectively bad. That is the Baker experience in Tampa. What do you make of that in totality? And is that something you want to pay a premium for?
And probably not, which is, again, where I would arrive with, like, I don't know if I would want to attach myself to that much money to Baker Mayfield. But again, I do think it comes down to a little bit the other factors of him being older and him, again, being a guy who I think is mobile, and maybe that's going to fall off a little bit. Like, listen, I obviously like Trevor Lawrence a lot, and I think that he's better. But I think you could probably generally put these two quarterbacks in the same quality of player, or at least a lot of people would. But Trevor's a lot younger, and I think you can see more upside with him, and I think his game is less tied to mobility.
He's so much more gifted
him,
too. I mean,
well, Baker went first overall too. Like, Baker can throw it.
I know he did, but I don't like Trevor's just
that's
built
fair.
like
Baker,
a mech warrior.
He is. And so there are some other factors, but like, I think, again, that's why it's not just like the general player quality bucket. It's like some of these other factors with Baker.
So the question Nat asked, what is the best, worst, and most likely paths? The best path is that I think this is the best path, and even it's maybe hard to frame it this way, but I do think this would be the best outcome for the Bucs. Next year, Baker is good enough for you to retain Baker. You're paying him whatever. You give him the Daniel Jones contract. That's the hypothetical. You hire the next hotshot offensive play calling head coach, and you get a Liam Cohen-esque influence from that play caller. And then you get the best out of Baker for the next 2 to 3 years into his mid-30s. You're legitimately competitive over that time because that's the offensive ecosystem. I think that's the best outcome if you are the Buccaneers. The worst outcome for you and the team is probably, I guess the worst outcome is like depending on who, worse for who. For Baker, I think it's the Bucs bottom out this year. And then Baker moves on, and he's like a quick fix quarterback, a la what Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins were in the NFC South 3 years ago. I think that's probably like the worst case outcome, but he still gets paid in that scenario. So it's not a terrible place to be. The most likely outcome, Baker is the Bucs quarterback for the next 2 to 3 years. They're a middling offense, and that's probably where things end up. They're the 14th best offense in the league for the next 2 years. Like, that would be my guess beyond this season as to like the most likely way this plays out.
I agree with you, except for the part where if Baker bottoms out this year, like if he's bad, is somebody going to sign him to start for them meaningfully after that? Like after
Geno Smith got another job, so
I think the answer is yes.
It's probably fair.
Especially when you're looking at the free agent quarterbacks that are going to be available next year. I absolutely think even if Baker is bad this year, he will shake loose and start somewhere. Like, the Steelers will be in the quarterback mix again next offseason. Like, there will be these teams. And, you know, the team actually that we don't have to do this now, but I've already started, like, playing this out 2 or 3 steps in advance. Let's just say we get to the end of this year and we think similarly of Baker that we do now, but the Bucs have made the decision where they're not into it money-wise. The team that I actually think might make sense for him in terms of where they're at in their build, alternatives, and what they're going to need to get out of the 2027 season is Carolina.
Ooh. Yeah, I could see them doing that. That being like their best, like, quick, can we get one tier better of quarterback or whatever it is. I don't know if that. I don't know.
No, I mean, I know
I can
Steve
see
Wilkes
it. I
isn't
can see
there
that
anymore,
world.
but
Yeah.
it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of love lost between those two.
I get the history, but that's the sort of situation I'm talking about. I
Again,
think those
Geno Smith is back on the Jets.
That's a
those
great point.
situations I think will arise, but that's the one I had in mind, where it's like, and if you look at it, this part of this is driven by the discourse around the Bryce Young 5th-year option that was happening earlier this week, but the Panthers are paying Bryce Young $25 million next year, no matter what, in 2027. Well, that doesn't prevent you, if you wanted to move on from Bryce Young, if you're paying Baker on a relative extension, you're paying him not a lot in year one because it's a multi-year deal, and you're paying your quarterback room combined $35 to $40 million, they'll be able to afford that. So that's the type of situation, I think, that if there is like a next chapter for Baker that's not like totally doom and gloom, that could be potentially what it looks like. All right, we spent 20 minutes on that, but that was there's a lot of layers to that discussion. Let's get to the next one.
Baker is just a well of content this offseason. It's great.
Well, when you are the quarterback that now represents that much of a larger idea about the league and the way that Baker now seems to, you can take that in a lot of different directions. All right, what's the next one, Katie?
Speaking of the Panthers, this one is from Orestes. The Panthers' decision for Canales to willingly hand off play calling duties to Brad Idzik this offseason has me wondering how often a play calling head coach has done this, especially when they weren't on the hot seat, and what the track record for this might have been. This feels unusual in recent history that a coach hired to be an offensive play calling head coach has willingly given up that duty. Derrik, what do you got?
It was kind of hard for me to come up with that many examples. I feel like Tomlin kind of went on and off with doing this at certain times, of like him commanding the defense and him not. Did DeMeco Ryans call the defense initially for the Houston Texans and then handed that off to Matt Burke? So that was another one where, yeah, and so that's obviously a situation. Like sometimes I feel like you get the passing of the play calling responsibility again when it's like hot seat, people are scrambling, yada yada yada. With the Texans, it was like, we're so damn good. Like, I think DeMeco Ryans was like, I'm going to like flex my muscles and do some of this other stuff. And so that to me was like the first one that really came to my mind.
Yeah, that's a good one. There are a lot of examples of guys who gave it up either before they took the job or at certain like inflection points changed it. Like, so like Stefanski gave it to Tommy Reese in the middle of the season twice. And then now going into Atlanta, Tommy Reese is going to be the play caller in Atlanta. Kevin is not going to do that. Daboll was like this with Kafka, where initially he gave it to him and then there was kind of like a back and forth. But in a situation like this, where some of this stuff is driven by like necessity or urgency or pressure, and the fact that it doesn't really seem driven by that in Carolina, I think does make it seem like sort of an outlier. Speaking to the dynamics of this situation specifically, Dave and Brad have known each other for a really long time. And I think this is as much a opportunity granted by a mentor friend to a guy that has aspirations as it is indicative of anything that's going wrong with Carolina or that people should be worried about. Like, I think that Brad Idzik is a capable, ambitious person. And I think when you are in any sort of leadership role in the NFL, whether you're a coordinator, whether you're a head coach, trying to keep your staff as motivated, as engaged as possible, and acknowledging what their aspirations and motivations are is important. And I think there's at least a little bit of that in play with this, just from the outside looking in, if I had to guess, where it's like, he wants this, he's worked for it. I think we're in a position where this is the best thing to do for giving him an opportunity and for the overall health of like what we are as a staff. That would be my guess. And I think there's more to this than like, I don't think I'm good at it anymore, or I think he'd be better at it than me. I think that's what I would say.
Every example I could think up over my time, there was an element of pressure. Even if the guy didn't wind up getting fired, there was just some reason why there was pressure on them to make some kind of change. And really what I think is interesting is that this happened twice in 1 year. This weird thing that doesn't happen often is happening in two cities. And I think they're not completely congruous. Sean Payton gave up play calling duties to Davis Webb for this year as well. But it's wild that it's happening twice. And we all agree that it's not something that happens every year.
I'll say this, and this is probably irresponsible and a little bit reckless. When I look at it just from the outside looking in, the situation in Denver, to me, warrants a little bit more scrutiny and skepticism potentially in terms of the dynamics at play than the situation in Carolina does. Maybe, whether that's
100%.
founded or not, that's my read on it.
The something about the Carolina one just kind of feels like a natural, like, again, we're giving a guy the Denver situation just feels weird, in part because especially like Sean Payton just absolutely seems like someone who would not want to give that up, and the fact that he has is interesting to say the least.
Also, it's funny because obviously Sean Payton and Davis Webb don't go way back. That would be impossible. Davis Webb's only 31 years old. And he never played for Payton. So, I mean, they might know each other in a way that I'm not familiar with, but the obvious connection of like Payton coaching Davis Webb is not there. And so I do think that's a little more interesting, and I agree. I would have never guessed Sean Payton would voluntarily give up play calling. So
I'll say this about
yeah.
the Broncos coaching staff. There is no set of staff dynamics and the way that a team works that comes up more unprompted when you're talking to other coaches around the league than the way the Broncos operate. They are there till 3 a.m. It is just a different way of functioning than a lot of other staffs function. And I think that's just worth thinking about when you consider like some of the dynamics in that building, maybe compared to some of the dynamics with a lot of other staffs around the league.
It's really awesome that Sean Payton is carrying Bill Parcells' legacy by just being Bill Parcells. It's great.
It comes up unprompted, other people just being like, yeah, we talked to the guys in Denver. It's a whole different beast over there. And so that is a thing that is like openly discussed. Let's get to the next one, Katie.
This one's from Elliot. He says, this year we are coming off one of the weirdest drafts as well as one of the weirdest coaching cycles in recent memory. This brings up a question. In the case especially with the Bills and Ravens, whether a coach is more important than players, what if, instead of being able to hire coaches as normal, any fired coaches, college coaches, and assistants could enter the draft? How would they be valued, both in a normal draft as well as this one? Would we see coaches going in the top 10, later in the first round, or not until day 2 or 3 of the draft? Dave, what do you got?
First of all, Elliot, this is just a phenomenal question. Thank you
I love this shit.
Thank you for understanding the assignment of the mailbag. I love it. And I changed my thinking about this midway through, because when I first read the question, I was kind of thinking of it like a fantasy football draft where you and your 10 or 12 team league is doing fantasy and you're like, oh, well, coach is important, but it's kind of like a great defense in fantasy football where like there are 2 or 3 that are worth drafting at all, and you're waiting until you've addressed some other positions before you do it. But as I was thinking about that, I was like, wait a second. No. This is not a 12-team league. This is a 32-team league. And so if that's how you're thinking of it, of like a true NFL draft, I started thinking like, okay, there's like 6 to 8 quarterbacks that are really worth prioritizing. And then just go through the top tier positions of like, we did a mailbag a few weeks back at this point where we said there's like 10 to 12 premium edge rushers, and there's probably 15 premium receivers that are worth being excited about, and on down the line. And I found myself thinking, okay, there's probably 45, 50 players that are really, really good and important enough that you should try to prioritize those guys. But I found myself thinking, like, after that drop off where the true blue chips are gone, I'm starting to get interested in McVay, Shanahan, McDonald, Ben Johnson. And I don't think.
So
You think there are 50 players you'd rather have than Sean McVay?
Probably, yeah.
Oh, I don't get nearly that deep into it.
So hold on.
I'm talking like the quarterbacks, and then I'm curious, like, which players are better?
No,
Hold
like,
on.
I think. So go ahead, Derek.
I think I took this question as not like drafting the entire league, but like, what if in this cycle, the Cowboys had to either draft Jesse Minter or Caleb Downs? Like that.
Yes.
That's kind of how I'm imagining.
Oh, I was thinking of it from like scratch, where you're just
Oh,
like
no,
filling out
No,
your
no.
organization.
I thought it was
I
like
think
like the set of fired coaches or a promoted assistants in a given year, and also like within that specific draft class. That's how I was imagining it.
And I think that's how I envisioned it as well. And so I think that, but if you like, and so I think that's right. But in any given draft, it changes, right? And so, like, let's play this out. I think that's a really good one. And so this draft is an interesting one where it's like a guy like Jesse Minter. How many players in this draft, because there aren't a lot of quarterbacks and there weren't a lot of blue chip talent, how many guys in this draft specifically would you have taken over Jesse Minter?
I'll be honest, that's not as interesting to me because Jesse Minter he's not a known commodity as a head coach, but we know what he can do for a defense. Even the guys that you love the most in any given draft class, it's such a projection jumping to the NFL. Like, I would take, in this draft class specifically, it's already been long enough since the draft that I have to go back and refresh myself on what even happened. But, like, I'm probably taking Jesse Minter in the top 10. Right?
Yes.
I probably am too. But even then, I don't think that that's perfect. Like, we thought Brandon Staley was going to be like a certain, like, does something for your defense. And then, like, and again, I think Minter will be a good head coach. I'm not saying that's going to go the way that Brandon Staley did, but, like, there's also a potential outcome for. That's why I think it's interesting is that it's guys who have not been head coaches before you're drafting them to do something they've never done. Sometimes
like,
it could
John
be. That's
Harbaugh
true.
is an option for this. Like, you
like
could
Mike
draft John
McDaniel
Harbaugh.
could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And even last year, like the last year's crop, I think is a really interesting one because let's play this out. Like, if you're the Bears, you can use your 10th overall pick on Colston Loveland or Ben Johnson. It's Ben Johnson by far.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's like, it's not even a discussion. And so with these and that's a projection, but like you have a guess. If we were doing it for all coaches, like, think about the impact that a coach has over the course of a team. Like, how many I think quarterback, you could argue coach or quarterback, right? Like, would you rather have Josh Allen or Sean McVay? Is
Josh
like
Allen.
a real discussion.
Yeah.
It's probably the quarterbacks, but it's the highest level quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
How many quarterbacks would you list off before you got to the coaches? And would there be any non-quarterbacks? Like, would you rather have Myles Garrett or Sean McVay?
See, that's what I think is more interesting because I don't know, man. I still, like, when you're talking about the gap between the blue chip guys, and like I said, there's a handful of them at every single position. And I get it. Coaching can be such a great equalizer, but having a Myles Garrett or a Jamar Chase or an offensive tackle that you just never have to think about for a decade, I mean, that feels so tremendously valuable to me. I think it's close. I don't know. Like, maybe 50 is harsh, but, like, I think I could get toward the bottom of the first round and be conflicted about whether I wanted to take a coach or a player.
I do think Myles Garrett is an interesting one because I think people will immediately look at it and be like, well, what have the Browns done since Myles Garrett has gone there? But that to me is a product of, like, the way that the NFL draft works. Like, it's like if you put Myles Garrett on an average NFL team, like, you would get higher quality play. Like, I still probably would take
Myles
the coaches,
Garrett
but
can't make a bad team average. A good coach can make a bad team average or an average team good. The overall impact and like scope that a coach has is just so much bigger than any one player who's not a quarterback.
I probably agree. I would probably still land on the coach, but I want people to not just look at Myles Garrett and be like, well, he's on the Browns and what have the Browns done? Like,
that's fair.
His defenses have been elite at times, almost solely because he exists there. And I do think that matters.
I'm not trying to be like the players don't
right,
matter.
yeah,
That's not how I feel at all. I just think is I like this, and it would require more scrutiny to actually think about this. And I remember Barnwell probably in 2014 wrote a story about like how many, if you like in a trade value situation, how many players are more valuable than Jim Harbaugh. And it was like a really interesting way to think about this. And that was 12 years ago now. But my knee-jerk thought is a certain number of quarterbacks would go first, and then a certain number of coaches would go first. And I don't think that list is necessarily that long. But I think when I think about the post-quarterback group, like McVay, hopefully Ben Johnson is that sort of guy, Kyle Shanahan, like the high-end coaches, and then I think I get to the non-quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
then
will
we get to
say-
the rest of the coaches. That's my knee-jerk thought.
Going back to my coaches as fantasy defenses thing, there's like 4 that I would prioritize drafting, and then I wouldn't give a shit after that. I'm like, okay. Like
I'll get one at some point.
Yeah, once these 6 guys are gone, does it matter? And
That's kind of how I would think about it. Is I think
Yeah.
that group of coaches I think would go before the non-quarterbacks just because of the scope of impact. Like you're affecting entire units. Like the offensive success is it's directly tied to quarterback play and the quality of your offensive ecosystem, and the coach drives that. And like, I just think that the coach can have such an outsized impact on that. Not over a coach can't fix poor talent across the board, but one player is one player. Like, I'd rather have a good collection of talent than a good coach, but that's not the question here. It's like, it's one player or one coach. And so that to me is what swings it.
You're probably right. I'm just imagining if you drafted Sean McVay 8th in a draft of everyone, then you're that much more depleted when it comes time to start adding talent. But you're right. I mean, there's 22 guys that you're leaning on, and the differences that he would make up for you is worth it at the end of the day. Yeah, I think you influenced me. It's just hard to imagine having those sorts of players available to you and not drafting one. But in totality, I think that's right.
Doing it as an offseason exercise, though, becomes really interesting. I think in this draft specifically, I'd probably rather bet on a Jesse Minter than I would on a lot of the players in the top 10. But like, let's just play this out even further. The 2021 draft that we all loved, right, with Jamar Chase and all of those guys, that coaches hired in that cycle were Urban Meyer, Robert Saleh, Arthur Smith, Brandon Staley, David Culley, Dan Campbell, Nick Sirianni. Even in the moment, I think I rather would have had a lot of the players than that collection of coaches. Right? Like, even in the moment, I think I'd rather have Jamar Chase than any of those guys because they're such unknowns. And the unknown quality of it does change things a little bit.
Right, but and again, it depends on the class a little bit. Like this class, like you could probably bump the number higher in terms of like how early would I take the head coach. But that 2021 class was like, we knew it was stars up and down the top 10. And so that does kind of change the math. Even if there had been some head coaching candidates that we were excited about. I think Saleh, people were excited about him. And I think he is a good coach. But guys like Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell, it's like, to Dave's point, to not have to think about my tackle situation for a long time because I have Penei Sewell, that kind of goes a long way.
Do we think, I'd be curious of like the actual historical hit rate on this. Do you think the historical hit rate is higher for players we consider blue chip prospects at premium positions or coaching candidates? Like, who is it more like, let's like pick the best possible coaching candidate over the last like 5 years, probably like Ben Johnson, right? In terms of like the guy that was the most sought after, the guy that had like the most interest. And then let's compare him to like Jamar Chase. Like in the moment, who do you think has a better chance of success when we've never seen them do it in the NFL?
I think blue chip, honestly. I feel like the
Probably.
NFL is actually pretty
right.
good at being like, that guy is a special talent. We're going to bet on it. I feel like the NFL is pretty good at that.
So then
Also,
you have like these competing factors where the uncertainty, even if we acknowledge that the impact of the coach is probably wider than one blue chip player at a non-quarterback position, if the uncertainty is higher with the coaches, does that push you to draft the blue chip players ahead of them in this sort of exercise?
I do think the NFL has largely gotten better about that, at least when it comes to like superstar coaching candidates. Not necessarily, it's still a crapshoot whether a coach is going to work out, and successful coaches come from all over the place. But I just remember going back decades back when the hotshot college coach used to get the NFL job, and that was a disaster so often. Like the NFL fell in love with so many bad head coaches over the, dating back to the 2000s and the 90s and even before that.
I think that's true to a point. But I also think, like, let's not pretend that we weren't excited about Brandon Staley in 2021.
True.
Let's not pretend that everyone associated with the NFL was like, man, Aaron Glenn, what's Aaron Glenn going to do? We're excited about Aaron Glenn. And then a year later, it's just like, holy shit.
I think I have the perfect one. In 2023, the Texans hired DeMeco Ryans and then drafted Will Anderson. Which would you have rather done? Like, if you can only have picked one.
It's a really, really good question.
Like, DeMeco's great, but Will Anderson, like, pass rushers like that don't come along very often.
This is also my natural inclination to default to the offensive coach and the offensive play caller as like the most valuable version of this. And so that's why for me, it's like that one, that one's a little more interesting, right? It's like, I think I'd still, oh man, that's a tough one.
That one is the toughest because those two feel like the hardest to divorce in terms of like, why is the Texans defense
It's
as
so
good
true.
as it is?
It's so true.
It's funny because I have the 2021 draft pulled up in front of me because you said you wanted to talk about it. And he'd be super high on the list of coaches I would draft. But there's Trey Lance staring at me with the number 3 overall pick from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. So, nobody's infallible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it unfair that I think I'd rather have Will Anderson? This is my offensive bias showing. I think I'd rather have Will Anderson.
I think I probably, and again, I think DeMeco Ryans is obviously a fantastic coach, but the pass rushers like that, we're usually pretty good at the hit rate on that. Like when we really think that they are that level of guy, the NFL is pretty good at like, yep, that's correct.
This is exactly what we're talking about, though, where you have the quarterbacks at the top, and then you have a small group of coaches that I think would go after the quarterbacks, and then you get into the group of non-quarterbacks versus that next tier of coaches and what that looks like. And I do think that that's a more difficult decision. Fun question. All right, what's the next one, Katie?
Let's remember some guys. This one is from Jacob Van Roy. He says, gentlemen, who do you believe is the second best draft pick of all time when you weigh where they were drafted versus the career they had? I think we can all comfortably say Tom Brady is the best, but as Bill Goldberg always said, who's next? Options I thought of: Kurt Warner, Bart Starr, and Terrell Davis. Any other ideas? Thanks for reading, and I really love the show. Robert, take it away.
Kurt Warner wasn't drafted, so I think that's a tough one. But
that's
in terms of that one's a cheater. Like, and it's like Tony Romo would be in there, right? If we're doing undrafted guys. The easy answer is Joe Montana. Right? Like Joe, if you look at NFL history, like Joe Montana is the easy answer.
I think you gotta separate quarterback from everybody else because it's just I think Montana is an obvious answer, and I would throw Mahomes in there too. Getting him at number 10 overall is crazy.
I actually put that as well. Like to have this initial 7 years that he had at 10th overall is like, I know it's first round, all that stuff, but that's crazy.
Yeah, that's a good one. I dug a little bit deeper when it came to I was looking at players like drafted a little bit later, but Mahomes is a very good answer. I tried to limit it to like the last 20 years just to like have it be like the modern version of the NFL. Yeah. Some guys I would throw out there: Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
Absolutely involved in this in terms of like ROI from where they were drafted. Romo wasn't a draft pick, but he's in there. The Kelce's.
Both of them, yeah.
Absolutely.
What, 3rd and like 6th round picks?
3rd and 6th round picks, the Kelce's. Like what Travis Kelce was a 3rd round pick. NFC West guys, Richard Sherman is in there as a 5th round pick. I would put Fred Warner in there as one of the best draft picks of the last like 20 years. Yep, 3rd round pick. Those are most of the names I came up with. But the Kelce's, those two quarterbacks, Richard Sherman, Fred Warner, Romo being in there a little bit. Like the modern answers, that's what I came up with outside of like the first 2 rounds.
Sherman was on my list as well. I had some older school guys. I mean, I got to throw it out there. 16th overall. And again, like I know it's first round. I get it. 16th overall. And you get Jerry Rice, who to this day is, I mean, like, it's not even a question. Like it's one of the few things in the NFL where nobody's going to debate you about who the best is. Like the gold standard, getting him 16th overall, I think is crazy. And then another first round pick that I think has insane value, 26th overall, Ray Lewis being the standard for linebacker play and also one of the foundations of an organization that was just getting off the ground and was part of both of their Super Bowl teams and was the MVP of their first Super Bowl. I mean, getting him at 10 would have been crazy. And the Ravens got him all the way back at 26th overall. I mean, that's nuts.
Aaron Donald was the 14th pick in his own draft.
Yeah.
So to get out of the first round for a minute, I did go back a little bit more to the 90s. Actually, another into the 90s. Shannon Sharpe was a 7th round pick, and he had a Hall of Fame career. Like that, in terms of ROI, that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I don't want to go back too far because then it's just like hard to get your arms around. I wanted to wait a little bit, but those 2 decades, I think those are the guys that I landed on.
I wanted to throw this out there too. If he never plays another down, what the Niners got out of Purdy as Mr. Irrelevant is still ridiculous. I mean, we used to say like Ryan Suckup was the best Mr. Irrelevant. That's a success story for the last pick in the draft, and then you show up and get a guy who can take you to a Super Bowl and is worth a contract extension and has won a shitload of games for the 49ers. I mean, nowhere near as good as Montana or Mahomes or most of these other guys we've said, but like you're not supposed to be able to find that caliber of player with the final pick in the draft.
Two guys I would throw out that I didn't list them because they played on multiple teams. And so it's the team that drafted them didn't necessarily get all of this value. But Cousins is involved in for the exact same reason. Like what Kirk Cousins' contract has looked like for where he was drafted is remarkable. And the other one, T.O. was a 3rd round pick.
Man, that's a great one.
But it's like, who's pick? Like, is it the Niners? Is it like
valuable
so
to the league,
places?
to the NFL as a whole?
There were a lot of guys that I thought about, and I just leaned toward lifers, like guys who played most of, if not all of their careers for one team. Because like
that's what I did too.
Charles Haley is worth mentioning too, but he's split between the Niners and the Cowboys. It's like, where do you go with that? And so guys that were with one team for most of their careers, I weighted more heavily. One more, because I say this all the time, freaky Hall of Fame caliber edge rushers are supposed to be big time picks. Michael Strahan was pick 40.
Oh, wow.
And
he's
6th on the all-time sack list, and all the all pros and Pro Bowls you could want, and helped the Giants win a Super Bowl. Getting him at pick 40 is pretty wild too.
The last one I throw out, pass rushers, similar conversation. Jared Allen was a 4th round pick.
Wow.
But
he split time between teams
yeah, that's
too.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
He split time between teams. But Jared Allen is another one where it's like Jared Allen finished with 136 sacks as the 126th pick in the draft. That just does not happen very often.
This is option 0 on Discord. They say, as the Rams have shifted from 11 personnel to 13 personnel over the years, Kyle has steadfastly stuck in using a fullback. Juszczyk. What do you think is the advantage of a fullback compared to a 3rd wide receiver or extra tight ends? Is it as simple as Juszczyk being a cool hang? Derek, what do you think?
I'm sure he is, but I don't think that is really what the reason for him being where he is. I think it's a couple of things. I would say schematically, it just depends a little bit on some of the runs that you want to run. Like, I know Kyle Shanahan's run game has evolved a little bit over the last handful of years, but it's still a lot of wide zone, lead zone, all this sort of stuff. And when you have a true traditional fullback in the backfield, a guy who is used to lining up there, sees the angles really well, that's the style of play that they want to do. It makes sense to have like a true fullback at that spot. And I know that the Rams sometimes will have a tight end and put him at fullback, but it's just different when you're a lifer at that position. And then the other thing that I would say, and I think maybe the reason they enjoy it, it's a unique advantage. There are other teams that use fullbacks, but he's the only guy that good, who is that good a pass catcher, who is an elite blocker, who has been doing it for, I mean, Juszczyk came into the league in 2013, 2012. It's been a long, because he was with the Ravens for a while. Yeah. And that's kind of the other thing too, is there are not that many fullbacks. He really might be the only one who has played in so many offenses for so long that put him on the field a lot. Like, he's really the only fullback in the league that has this many reps. So there's just kind of like a unique advantage that they can get out of having this one guy. And so I really would be curious to see how this evolves whenever he decides to go, whenever he decides to retire. Then what does Kyle Shanahan do? I don't know. But I think right now they're in a spot where it's like, we're the only team that can get away with this. And this gives us a kind of unique advantage.
I settled on thinking, like, I think it's the body type and the skill set that Juszczyk brings to the position. I mean, think about how much the 49ers use motion too, and how heavy a role that Kyle Juszczyk has in that. I mean, he darts all over the formation all the time. You're so right, Derek. Like, they use him to get him out in space on like wide runs a lot. And I think, of course, there are plenty of tight ends who could do that, but I think Juszczyk just has a baseline of athleticism to let him do that stuff quickly, confidently, and in a variety of ways. I mean, he's an outlet in the passing game as well. You can count on him as the guy to get to the flat or the guy to break out of one of those motions into a wheel route or things like that. I just think his blend of size and athleticism is it's weird to say it's unique because I do think there are plenty of tight ends and H-backs that can do that. But I think he moves faster and more fluidly than your average tight end who would fill that role. And on top of that, when in doubt, it's not so much that Juszczyk is a cool hang. Juszczyk's been in this offense for a decade, and coaches love guys that they can trust. Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to have to think about whether this guy is going to something up because he went the wrong way or motioned to the wrong side or they had to call a timeout because something got screwed up. He just doesn't have to think about it. And I don't know Juszczyk's contract. I don't have it in front of me. I don't know it off the top of my head, but he doesn't make enough money to where Kyle Shanahan's like, we gotta save money somewhere. We got to do something else. I think he's going to ride that until the wheels fall off because trust is so important to football coaches.
I think everything you guys said is right on. The short area quickness and the movement skills absolutely stand out. Like, he's just moving differently than a lot of tight ends are going to move. He's 6'2". Like, he's a back. Like, at the end of the day, even if he's used in all these different ways, he's still built like a back. And so his ability, the change of direction in short areas, his ability to play in space, like when you're a lead blocker on some of these, and that's not everything he does, obviously, you're still seeing things like a back. Like, you still have to see the game that way. And so his ability to do that, you feel that. And even when he's not doing it from like a 2-back set in the backfield, he's still blocking on the move often enough where that way of moving and that way of seeing the game becomes advantageous. Just think about how many different times they've motioned him out and then he cuts back across the formation. Like, they're just asking him to move in very different ways. And in terms of deployment, with now having McCaffrey, having a back there that can see things from a pass protection standpoint, can actually do like in the backfield running back stuff, is important for them because of all the different ways they use McCaffrey. So that's a new wrinkle and benefit to him being back there, but it absolutely is important. And I think the other one is schematic and just in terms of like how teams react to certain personnel groupings. For a very long time, being in 21 was a better thing to do than being in 12 because of the way that defenses reacted to it. So in 2020, defenses played 42% nickel to 12 personnel. They paid 27% nickel to 21. And so if you want 2 receivers on the field, but you want to make sure the other team is in base, 21 was the quickest way to do that. Well, defenses have learned now that that's what they want you to do. And so now we're at a place where last season, it was exactly the same. It's 27.8% nickel for 21 and 12. And so now I think the advantages are more bucketed into schematic advantages and X's and O's on the chalkboard. I think previously one of the bigger advantages was you are dictating terms and how another defense is going to play. And so I think it's become less of that bucket and more of the first one, but that absolutely was a part of it when you go back over the last 10 or 15 years as to why the Shanahan teams wanted to do this.
Is it fair to say that's the most important undercurrent in football right now is successful defenses saying enough of this shit. We're going to do what we want.
It's why Kyle Shanahan, right? It's why until 3-ish years ago, Shanahan was always able to dictate his terms, and the offense could kind of be whatever it was going to be, even with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. And the reason it's had to change over the last few years is partly because of what you're talking about with just the different personnel changes on defense and stuff like that. Also, I looked this up. So Juszczyk was drafted 2013 by the Ravens, didn't really start playing until 2014. In that span, which is what, 12 seasons? Yeah, 12 seasons. He's played 5,900 snaps. I'm not going to go look at every fullback in the league over that span, but there's no shot anyone is even close. And so again, it just comes down to like, there really isn't anyone else in the NFL like this right now.
Dude, the only team, going back to 2022, the only team that's even in the same zip code as San Francisco for 21 personnel usage is Miami. They're the only team that's like, it's San Francisco and Miami over the last 4 years. And then the next best teams are many percentage points below that. It's like there are teams that use fullbacks, but and Mike McDaniel's not even in Miami anymore. So we'll see how that changes. Like the Niners they stand alone in terms of consistency with doing this.
Well, Al Gingold is on the Chargers. Like
that's true.
I assume they will continue to do this.
The Chargers are going to be the ones that jump up into the number 2 spot.
Yeah, I assume the Chargers will continue to do this. All right. That is all we've got for today. Sincerely appreciate all of you guys who sent in questions. We had a bunch that we didn't get to because we spent so much time on a lot of the good ones. We will try to get to those in future mailbags. So we'll continue to be doing these over the next, I don't know, the entire offseason, really. I'm going to put a week number on it. For now, that's all we got. Sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.